Alright, so in this example, and by the way, I'm very sorry about the bluish lighting on this paper. I'm not sure where that's coming from. It is the evening, so there's not the best lighting, so I do apologize about that. But let's go ahead and take a look at this next example. So here what we're going to do is we're going to sketch. So we are going to graph. You're going to need graph paper, so make sure you grab some. And then we have this equation. So we know it's going to be a circle, but the equation is x squared minus 6x plus y squared minus 2y plus 6 equals 0. And then we also need to identify the center and the radius of that circle. So if you take a look at this equation, hopefully you notice right away that it's not in standard form. Okay? This is actually called general conic form. And so what we need to do is we need to put it into standard form, because right now we don't know, we can't easily identify the radius or the center or even a point on the circle. So we're going to manipulate this equation a bit and put it, like force it into the form that we want, which is standard form. And we're going to do that by completing the square. Hopefully you remember how to complete the square. I'm going to go through it here, but if that's something that does not ring a bell, you might want to YouTube some videos or Google some stuff and get a little bit of a refresher on that. So let's start with grouping what we need to group. So I'm going to write x squared minus 6y, and what I want to do is I am going to find a constant value here that would make this a perfect square trinomial. Alright, so I'm going to leave a blank right there. Alright, so I grouped my x's. Now I'm going to group my y's. I have y squared minus 2y, and since this is positive, that's why I wrote a plus here. And I'm going to leave a space here, because the same thing I'm doing here is what I'm going to do with my y's. And then equals this constant I want on the other side. Alright, so that's going to become a negative 6. Alright, so the way that we complete the square, right, we want to take b, divide it by 2, and then square it. Alright, so here for my x's, if I take my b, remember a is the coefficient of the square term, b is the coefficient of the x term, and c would be the constant. There's no c here, obviously, because we're finding it. We're finding that perfect c that would make this a perfect square trinomial. So my b is negative 6. So when I do negative 6 divided by 2, I get negative 3. And when I do negative 3 squared, I get a positive 9. Alright, so I'm going to plug in a positive 9 right here. And you have to remember that if we add something to one side, I have to keep this equation balanced and add it to the other side. Alright, so it's easy to forget this part. You don't want to forget that. Alright, I'm going to do the same thing with the y's. Alright, so now my b is negative 2. So if I do negative 2 divided by 2, I get negative 1. And negative 1 squared is 1. So I'm going to add a 1 and add a 1 to both sides. Okay, now the reason that we want to do that is because now I can factor this. Right, and this is a perfect square trinomial, so when I factor this, I'm going to end up with two of the same binomials. And it's going to be x minus 3. Right, I just factored two numbers that multiply to 9, but give me a negative 6, x minus 3, and x minus 3. And because I have two of the same factors, I have x minus 3 squared. And the reason that that's convenient is because this is the first part of what something in standard form looks like. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to have a binomial squared, and so I'm going to have y minus, if you want to know a little bit of a trick, this sign always matches the sign of your b term. Alright, so two of the same number that multiply to 1 but add to negative 2, that would be 1. Alright, equals, and let's take a look at the right side, negative 6 plus 10 would be positive 4. Alright, so I've now taken this general conic form equation and put it into standard form equation. So this is not my final answer. I haven't even done what the question's asking me, but this is going to guide me in doing that. Alright, so if I want to identify the center and the radius, the center is going to be the HK. Remember, the HK is this one and this one, right? But the H is only this part. Remember, the minus is part of the formula. So the center is actually a positive 3 and a positive 1, even though you see minus 3 and minus 1. The trick is it's always going to be the opposite. So if you saw x plus 3, the center would have a negative 3. Okay? And then the radius, all right, this is the radius squared. So the radius is 2, right? Because 2 squared would be 4, and this is the radius squared. So now with this information, I have enough information to sketch my circle. Alright, so let's go ahead and make a graph. What I want to do is I want to start at this point, the center. So positive 3, 1. Here's my center. Okay, and the easiest way to do this is to use the radius in all 4 directions, up, down, left, and right. So I'm going to go 2 units up, I'm going to place a dot there, 2 units down, 1, 2, 2 units to the right, and 2 units to the left. You don't want to go 2 units diagonal because this is not actually the same length as this right here, or this right here. This would actually be longer. We know that because this is actually, if I made this shape to be a triangle, this hypotenuse, this diagonal, would be longer than the other sides just by the definition. Right? So I don't want to go in the diagonals, I want to go straight up, straight down, straight right, straight left. And then, as best you can, ooh, this is always the hardest part, just go ahead and connect those. And yeah, it's not a very good circle, but just make sure it doesn't look like a diamond, at least make sure it's somewhat curved. Alright, so that is how we sketch a circle.